Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science, where the questions that keep you awake at 3 a.m. finally get a chance to lull you back into something resembling rest. Tonight, your pillow is your spaceship, and the thought rattling in your head is simple yet profoundly unsettling. What if we are not the first civilization on this Earth? You picture yourself lying on a shoreline at dusk, warm waves brushing against your toes, the sky painted in bruised purples and fire-orange streaks. In the sand beneath your head could be grains that have rolled through millions of years, that have rested under the feet of creatures you can hardly imagine. That's the atmosphere we're stepping into, quiet, vast, and a little suspicious. Because here's the kicker. Statistically speaking, with billions of years behind us, you probably wouldn't survive the background radiation of realizing how easily our entire story could vanish without a footprint. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and your local time in the comments, so the rest of us night owls, insomniacs, and accidental philosophers can wave across the digital darkness. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You let yourself settle, your body heavy, but your mind restless as it wonders about this audacious possibility. The official story of civilization runs barely 6,000 years, give or take. Scribes scratching cuneiform in Mesopotamian mud, pharaohs dragging stones under the sun, rice paddies spreading across the Yangtze Valley. It feels ancient, almost incomprehensible. Yet compared to Earth's age of 4.5 billion years, this is just a late-night snack crumb on the kitchen floor of time. If the planet was a 24-hour clock, all of human civilization would arrive in the last fraction of a second before midnight. That leaves you asking the kind of question that makes geologists sigh and historians roll their eyes. With that much blank space, how can we be sure we're the first? The thought sounds conspiratorial at first, like something whispered in grainy YouTube documentaries with ominous background music, but serious scientists have actually entertained it, not because they believe dinosaurs had iPhones, but because absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence. Imagine dropping your phone into a lava flow. In seconds it's gone, not even a smear left in the rock. Scale that up across entire civilizations, and suddenly you realize how fragile the record might be. One sharp volcanic episode, one unlucky asteroid, and everything collapses. You picture the planet as a hoarder of secrets. Its tectonic plates keep cycling downward like conveyor belts, shoving older crust deep into molten silence. Oceans rise and fall, grinding coastlines away. Ice sheets advance, bulldozing whatever lies beneath. If you had built a glittering city on some prehistoric plain 200 million years ago, today it might be sitting under miles of granite, unrecognizable. And here you thought forgetting where you left your keys was bad. Of course, the mainstream position insists nothing like us came before. Archaeologists haven't found stone skyscrapers hiding beneath Jurassic mud, or lost iPads in Devonian coal seams. The fossil record holds trilobites, ammonites, dinosaurs, giant mammals, and eventually, finally humans. That's the Bamduang. But here's the sly historical fact. Even within recorded history, vast stretches remain mysterious. We don't fully understand how the pyramids were constructed, though engineers can reproduce plausible theories. We can't entirely map the Indus Valley script. We lost the recipe for Roman concrete for over 1,000 years before rediscovering its secret durability. If just a couple of millennia can blur human ingenuity into vig, what happens after millions? And here's your quirky tidbit to sprinkle like confetti across your dreamscape. In the 9th century, miners in California claimed to discover a hammered metal nail embedded inside solid rock supposedly millions of years old. Later analyses suggest it was just contamination or a mix-up, but those kinds of stories linger. They tickle the imagination, because every out-of-place object feels like a hand poking through time saying, "Psst, we were here first." Historians still argue whether myths like Atlantis are just metaphors or garbled memories of something real. Plato wrote of Atlantis not as a bedtime story, but as a cautionary tale about hubris. His source was supposedly Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests, who might have been repeating some half-remembered catastrophe. The tale of a civilization rising high, then vanishing beneath the waves, is so common it appears everywhere. Mesopotamian flood legends, Hindu cycles of destruction and rebirth, Native American accounts of fires that consumed the world, were these all just allegories? Or were they faint echoes of civilizations scrubbed away before ours ever started? As you breathe slower, you realize Earth itself is the best eraser. On a human scale, a building seems permanent, but zoom out and permanence is an illusion. The tallest skyscraper today, if abandoned, would crumble into dust in less than 10,000 years, barely a blink. The Eiffel Tower? Gone to rust in a couple of centuries without maintenance. Plastic bottles and stainless steel will outlast us a bit longer, but even they break down under geologic pressure. In the blink of planetary time, our mighty works might vanish as completely as footprints washed away by tide. Now, your mind drifts further back, into ages when continents themselves weren't where you expect them. The Triassic period, some 230 million years ago, was all about the supercontinent Pangaea. Dinosaurs and early mammals were scampering, forests were thick with strange ferns, and insects buzzed loudly enough to star in horror films. You imagine, absurdly but not impossibly, that some species, not human, not ape, but something with clever paws or agile claws, could have risen for a brief shimmer of time. They might have learned to shape tools, smelt metals, even carve cities. And then, like an unlucky roll of the dice, an extinction erased them, leaving not a shred. That thought is less about believing in secret paths and more about humility. Because if intelligence can arise once, why not twice? You feel the edges of sleep tugging you, as if your brain likes the comfort of considering possibilities too grand to prove or disprove. You drift in that liminal zone where every sound in your room, the fan's whir, the faint creak of the wall, feels like a clue from some other age. But you return half smiling to the present. It's late, your eyelids are heavy, and your brain is gleefully running wild with what-ifs. What if Earth is like a library, each civilization a book that gets burned, rewritten, or misshelved? What if we're simply the latest edition, the paperback reprint with a shiny cover but mostly recycled content? That idea might be laughable at noon, but at midnight it feels deliciously possible. And so you let the thought hang, unproven, unresolved, perfect for this twilight hour. Maybe you are not the first. Maybe the sand under your pillow remembers footsteps older than humanity itself. You lie there, letting the last thought ripple outward. Maybe civilizations before yours have come and gone, leaving behind nothing but whispers. That naturally drifts you toward the next uneasy realization. The fossil record, that so-called diary of Earth's history, isn't nearly as complete as your high school textbooks made it seem. In fact, calling it a diary is generous. It's more like someone dropped a stack of pages into a hurricane, and what you're left with is a handful of scraps, most of them smudged, torn, or completely missing context. Yet from those scraps, scientists reconstruct the grand story of life on Earth. It's impressive detective work. But if you were hoping for the fossil record to give a clear yes or no to whether another civilization ever existed, well, don't hold your breath. Think about what it takes for any organism, let alone a skyscraper or a laptop, to be preserved. The process is finicky, almost snobbish in its selectivity. An animal has to die in just the right place, under just the right conditions. Rapid burial, mineral-rich groundwater, absence of oxygen. Most living things don't get such VP treatment. Instead, they rot, get scavenged, dissolve, or are simply erased by weather. Statistically, the odds of your body becoming a fossil are lower than the odds of winning the lottery twice while being struck by lightning. Now extend that fragility to artifacts of an imagined lost civilization. A steel beam, if left exposed, rusts away in mere centuries. A paperback novel turns to pulp in decades. Even glass, which feels eternal when you smash it accidentally in your kitchen, eventually weathers into grains. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Less than 1% of all organisms that have ever lived are represented in the fossil record. That's not a metaphor, it's an actual scientific estimate. Entire ecosystems, entire eras of biodiversity, simply gone without leaving a recognizable fossil. The fact that we know dinosaurs existed is lucky beyond words. For all we know, the creatures that didn't fossilize outnumber those we did find 1,000 times over. If biological life itself slips through the cracks so easily, how confident can we be about detecting a hypothetical pre-human civilization? Your mind wanders into the quirky side of this puzzle. In 1972, workers at a uranium mine in Oklo, Gabon stumbled onto what looked like an ancient nuclear reactor buried in the rock. And for a moment, the world tilted. Had someone been splitting atoms billions of years ago? But the answer turned out even stranger. The rock formation itself naturally concentrated uranium in such a way that, chain reactions occurred without human interference. Nature had built its own reactor. That's the sort of discovery that makes you laugh nervously, because if nature can mimic our most advanced technology, how do we even separate a fossil of civilization from geology's own eccentric experiments? Historians still argue whether the fossil record gives us a truly representative sample of life's history or just a wildly skewed highlight reel. Paleontologists debate biases. Soft-bodied creatures are underrepresented, but deep ocean species rarely fossilize and entire biomes may vanish without a trace. If the debate is still unsettled for organisms, imagine the chaos of trying to detect the remnants of culture, art, or infrastructure. Close your eyes and picture a vast city, maybe not human, maybe reptilian or insectoid, who knows, thriving on a lush plain 200 million years ago. Buildings stretch skyward, vehicles hum across broad avenues, and culture pulses through music, art, and science. Then a flood sweeps in, or an asteroid, or the slow grind of tectonic shift. Millennia pass. Sediment buries the ruins, mountains rise, rivers carve valleys, and glaciers scrape the surface clean. By the time modern geologists hammer at the rocks, what's left? At best, a few oddly shaped minerals. At worst, absolutely nothing. Even more disorienting, Earth recycles itself. Oceanic crust is dragged under continents, remelted, and spat back out as volcanic rock in cycles of hundreds of millions of years. Land isn't permanent either. Erosion erases cliffs, deserts cover forests, and entire mountain ranges rise and fall. That glittering city? It may have been swallowed and digested by the planet itself, like a notebook thrown into a bonfire. Now you let your thoughts drift to modern analogies. Think about how archaeologists get giddy over a single clay shard from ancient Mesopotamia. That shard survives only because clay is hardy, fire-baked and resistant to weathering. If a hypothetical ancient civilization relied on materials less forgiving, wood, bone, even metals, the odds of their remnants reaching us are slimmer than slim. In a sense, what we interpret as the history of Earth is really just the history of stuff that fossilizes well. There's an ironic little joke here. We've invested so much energy into plastic, and plastics might be one of the few enduring markers of our time. But given enough geologic pressure, even plastic degrades, transforming into hydrocarbons or being pulverized into microplastics indistinguishable from natural sediments. If you're hoping for alien archaeologists millions of years in the future to marvel at your old grocery bags, don't count on it. And yet, despite all this, we humans are stubbornly confident. We point to the fossil record and say, see, no civilizations before us. But what we should probably say is, see, no civilizations that left the kind of traces we know how to interpret. It's a subtle but enormous difference. The fossil record is not proof of absence. It's just proof of survival, a biased selection of who and what got lucky in the preservation lottery. As you let this thought settle, your body feels heavier. The fan in your room becomes the sound of ancient winds brushing over layers of forgotten rock. You're hovering at the edge of sleep where everything blurs, and yet your mind lingers on one last idea. If we are indeed the first civilization on Earth, it's not because the fossil record proves it. It's because the fossil record is too faint, too patchy, too fragile to prove otherwise. And maybe that's the scariest part. You drift further into this long, drowsy thought experiment, your mind still humming with the silence of the fossil record. That silence leaves room for whispers, and those whispers often come dressed as myth. You've heard them since childhood. Stories of floods that swallowed the world, fires that scorched the sky, and gods who walked among mortals before retreating into shadow. There are bedtime stories, campfire tales, scripture verses. But tonight, lying in the quiet, you can't help but wonder, what if some of those myths are not just metaphors, but memory fragments? Memories of something older, something erased, yet stubborn enough to survive in the only medium immune to erosion, human storytelling. Take the flood myth, for example. The most famous is probably Noah's Ark, with its pairs of animals trudging onto a wooden vessel as the world drowns. But go back further and you find the Sumerian tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In that story, the gods decide to wipe out humanity with a great flood, but one man is warned, builds a boat and survives. Travel further east and you meet Manu from Hindu tradition, who builds a boat with the help of a giant fish avatar of Vishnu. Cross the oceans and Native American traditions from Hopi to Ojibwe also carry flood legends. that's not just a coincidence. A mainstream historical fact here: geologists confirm that during the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, rapid glacial melts did cause catastrophic flooding across multiple continents. Rivers swelled, sea levels surged, and coastlines were swallowed. To the people alive then, it must have felt like the world ending. And so the memory of it was told, retold, and mythologized. But here's the fringe tidbit that makes you smile into your pillow. Some writers in the early 20th century insisted that these flood stories weren't just about melting ice. They were coded memories of entire advanced civilizations destroyed by water. Atlantis, of course, takes the starring role. Plato's dialogues describe a great island empire, rich in technology and power, that fell out of favour with the gods and sank into the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. Scholars roll their eyes and call it allegory, but the story refuses to die. Every time archaeologists discover ruins along a drowned coastline, like Doggerland beneath the North Sea, or the sunken temples off India's coast, someone inevitably whispers, Atlantis. Historians still argue whether myths like Atlantis, or even the Garden of Eden, are purely symbolic or based on kernels of real events. Some say Plato's account was a morality play, a way to critique the arrogance of Athens. Others suggest he drew from garbled Egyptian records of ancient catastrophes, and some, more daring, suggest that maybe, just maybe, he was preserving a sliver of memory of a civilization far older than we imagine. You picture yourself standing in a smoky hall thousands of years ago, listening to elders pass on a tale. The fire crackles, shadows dance across stone walls, and the story describes gods wielding weapons of light, or cities rising high before crumbling into ruin. Was it just imagination? Or could it have been the distorted retelling of real events? Technologies and powers so advanced they seem divine. Stories mutate as they're retold like an endless game of telephone, but the seed at the core sometimes remains intact. Think about the Greek Titanomachy, where younger gods overthrew older gods in a cataclysmic war, or the Hindu concept of cyclical ages, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, where humanity rises to great heights before declining into corruption and collapse, only to reset again. These cycles stretch back not just thousands, but millions of years in the texts. Sure, you can interpret that spiritually, but late at night, it's fun to tilt your head and ask, could they be dimly remembered accounts of civilizations rising and falling on scales we don't normally consider? And here's where the quirky imagination takes a leap. In 1885, miners in Austria supposedly found a small cube of iron embedded in coal, nicknamed the Wolf's Egg iron. Some argued it was the remnant of an ancient machine, proof of lost industry. Modern analysis says it's probably a chunk of naturally formed pyrite or a misplaced tool fragment. Still, its legend lingers in the same way Atlantis does, half debunked but never fully discarded. Myths have that same quality. Even when dismissed, they cling, refusing to fade. Your eyelids droop as you think about how myths act like time capsules, carrying the faint scent of something older than language. Unlike fossils, they don't rely on lucky burial or mineralization. They survive because people repeat them, generation after generation. The details warp. What was once a memory of a city destroyed by volcanic eruption becomes a story of gods hurling fire, but the emotional truth, the trauma of loss, stays alive. Modern scholars dig at this tension too. Some argue myths are purely cultural inventions, metaphors for the cycles of life and death, the struggle of humanity against nature. Others argue myths encode environmental memories, like the eruption of Thera inspiring the Atlantis story, or local floods inspiring global deluge myths. And then there are the romantics who lean closer to you, whispering, maybe myths are the only surviving fossils of civilizations time erased. The room is quiet, but your imagination is loud. You see temples rising out of jungles, swallowed by vines until they're found centuries later by explorers who can hardly believe their eyes. You remember how even in our recorded history, entire cities have been lost. Troy thought to be legend until Schliemann dug it up in the 19th century, or Angkor Wat swallowed by Cambodian forests, rediscovered only through whispers of monks. If history that recent can blur into myth, why not something far older, something utterly beyond our official timeline? A slow smile tugs at you as you float deeper into this thought. Maybe the stories of gods, monsters and floods are like postcards from civilizations that refuse to go entirely silent. You don't have to believe in Atlantis or Lemuria or lost golden ages to enjoy the possibility. You just have to admit that memory is sneaky. It clings where you least expect it, sometimes in stone, sometimes in song, and so as the fan hums, you let the myth settle over you like a blanket. They are the dream world's fossils, soft yet persistent, reminding you that even if the rocks fail, the stories endure. Whether they are metaphors, memories, or both, they keep alive the tantalizing thought that perhaps we are not the first to tell them. You're already swaying on the edge of sleep when another peculiar question bubbles up, one that started as a joke but somehow refuses to leave the scientific sponge. It's called the Silurian Hypothesis, and it asks a question almost too strange for polite company. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, would we even be able to detect it today? You imagine the setup as if whispered over coffee. Not humans, not apes, but maybe dinosaurs running factories, reptiles printing newspapers, or some forgotten lineage of creatures tinkering with machines under ancient sunlit skies. It sounds like science fiction, but the thought was actually published in a serious journal by two NASA-affiliated researchers. Their point wasn't that velociraptors were out there driving cars, but that Earth's geological record is so incomplete, so violently recycled, that even if it happened, we might never know. The name Silurian comes from an old British TV show, Doctor Who, where reptilian humanoids called Silurians once ruled the Earth before retreating underground. Scientists, with their usual blend of curiosity and cheek, borrowed the title for this hypothesis. The idea is simple. Geologists rely on signs like fossils, sediment layers, and isotope ratios to reconstruct the past. But if an industrial civilization thrived tens of millions of years ago, would those signs even survive? Or would they be erased by tectonics, erosion, and time's merciless sweep? Here's your mainstream historical fact to keep the story anchored. The dinosaurs truly did dominate Earth for about 105 million years, far longer than humans have existed. Some developed large brains relative to body size, like the troodontids. Paleontologists once speculated that if evolution had continued uninterrupted, creatures like them might have grown even more intelligent. It's not proof of dinosaur engineers, but it's enough to spark the imagination, especially when you're staring at the ceiling at midnight, thinking maybe you should have stopped after your second cup of coffee. Now for the quirky tidbit. In 1973, Canadian paleontologist Dale Russell proposed a thought experiment about what would have happened if troodontids had kept evolving. He even created a model of a hypothetical creature called the dinosauroid, which looked eerily human to see. Big head, upright posture, opposable thumbs. The scientific community laughed, called it speculative fluff, and moved on. But that speculative fluff still hovers in the corner of your mind like a shadow you can't quite shake. Could evolution have already played this card once before, only to sweep it away in an extinction event? Historians still argue whether intelligence itself is inevitable in evolution, or just a lucky accident. Some biologists argue that once life gets complex, intelligence becomes useful and might evolve repeatedly, like eyes and wings did. Others say no, it's a cosmic fluke, a one-time jackpot, and expecting dinosaurs to invent Wi-Fi is like expecting jellyfish to suddenly compose symphonies. The truth is, no one knows. That uncertainty leaves the Silurian hypothesis dangling like a loose thread in the tapestry of science, tempting you to tug at it. Picture yourself walking through a dense Mesozoic jungle. Ferns tower above you, dragonflies with wingspans the size of hawks buzz overhead. You hear the rumble of something large moving in the distance. You part the greenery and there, why not, is a stone road, cracked but deliberate, leading to structures half swallowed by vines. Maybe they're temples, maybe they're laboratories. Your rational brain insists it's nonsense, but your dreaming brain, the one nodding along to the hum of your fan, says, and if it weren't nonsense, what then? Of course, even if such a civilization had existed, its traces would be ghostly. Concrete dissolves, metals corrode, glass breaks down. After tens of millions of years, the clearest markers might be subtle chemical fingerprints, changes in carbon isotopes, spikes of rare elements in sediment layers, or sudden warming events in the climate record. And here's the unsettling part. Scientists do see weird spikes like that, though they usually attribute them to natural causes like volcanism. But if you're inclined toward midnight conspiracies, you can't help but raise an eyebrow. What if those weren't volcanoes? What if they were smokestacks? You can almost hear the counter-arguments rolling their eyes at you. The Silurian Hypothesis isn't meant to prove dinosaurs had smartphones. It's meant to remind us that geology isn't an open book. It's more like a heavily censored diary. You might think you're reading the whole story, but huge swaths of pages are missing. The hypothesis is less about rewriting the past and more about highlighting how fragile evidence is. That fragility, ironically, makes you more willing to toy with possibilities. And here comes a quiet joke drifting into your mind. Imagine archaeologists in the far future unearthing one of our shopping malls and mistaking it for a temple complex dedicated to the god of Orange Julius. They'd debate whether escalators were ceremonial or practical. If interpreting a few thousand years can be tricky, interpreting tens of millions becomes absurdly difficult. The Silurian Hypothesis doesn't give you answers. Instead, it hands you a mirror and asks, how permanent do you think your civilization is? You look at the reflection and realize the answer is not very. If we vanished tomorrow, in 100,000 years our cities would be dust. In 1 million, the tectonic churn would begin burying everything. In 10 million, you'd be lucky to find a faint chemical trace. And if you zoom out to the scale of 100 million years, our existence could be compressed into a blip, indistinguishable from natural variation. That's why the Silurian question lingers. It's not about dinosaurs building spaceports. It's about humility. It's about realizing that the ground beneath your bed tonight has lived 1,000 lives before you, most of which you'll never know. It's about acknowledging that certainty is a comfort blanket, not a guarantee. And maybe that's exactly the kind of realization that helps you loosen at your grip on the day and drift towards sleep. So you exhale, long and slow, while the fan whispers. You imagine reptilian philosophers long ago staring at their own night sky, asking their own impossible questions. Maybe they lasted 1,000 years, maybe 1 million. Maybe they're nothing but dust now. But if they dreamed, if they wondered, then maybe you're not so alone in your midnight musings. And that, strangely enough, is a comfort. Your mind drifts from reptilian philosophers back towards something a little more tangible, at least tangible in theory. If there really had been civilizations before ours, surely there would be objects, artifacts, breadcrumbs left behind. And indeed, over the past 2 centuries, curious people have pointed to out-of-place artifacts, or OO parts if you want the conspiratorial abbreviation. These are items that seem to defy their geological or cultural context. Hammerheads encased in stone, coins found in coal, spark plugs sealed inside geodes. Each one arrives with the drama of a smoking gun, whispered across late-night radio shows or uploaded to forums where the comment section is half speculation and half sarcasm. But when you hold them up to the light of science, most melt away into mistakes, hoaxes, or misinterpretations. Still, they're hard to ignore because they tickle a very old itch, the possibility that the Earth hides secrets we've barely begun to scratch. One of the most famous examples is the so-called London hammer, discovered in Texas in the 1930s. It's a wooden handle with an iron hammerhead, somehow lodged in what appears to be ancient rock. At first glance, it screams, someone was doing DIY projects long before humans arrived. But geologists note that the hammer itself is 19th century in design. While the surrounding rock is likely just a concretion, a mass of minerals that hardened around the object. In other words, it's less time traveller's toolbox and more just geology being weird. Still, that hasn't stopped it from touring creationist museums as proof of lost technology. Here's your mainstream historical fact to ground the thought. Archaeologists have uncovered plenty of genuine artifacts that once seemed out of place until context was understood. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off Greece, is a gear-driven device more than 2,000 years old, capable of predicting astronomical positions. For decades it looked like it had fallen out of a modern clock, until closer study proved it was ancient Greek craftsmanship at its finest. It wasn't a relic of a forgotten age, it was just evidence that humans back then were far more technically clever than we gave them credit for. The lesson: sometimes impossible artifacts just reflect our own ignorance. But here's your quirky tidbit, tucked into the folklore of UU parts. In the 1920s, workers near Coso Mountain, California, claimed to find a spark plug sealed inside a geode, a rock supposedly hundreds of thousands of years old. If true, it would have rewritten history. In reality, later examinations showed it was almost certainly just a weathered 1920s champion spark plug, with mineral deposits forming around it. Nature has a knack for dressing up modern junk as ancient treasure, yet the story keeps circulating, passed along like gossip at a cosmic cocktail party. Historians still argue whether any of the out-of-place artifacts are worth serious study, or if they're all just examples of wishful thinking mixed with fraud. Some researchers take a middle path, noting that the persistence of these tales tells us something important about cultural psychology. People want to believe there were others before us. They want to feel part of a lineage stretching beyond recorded time. That yearning itself may be the real artifact, carved not into stone but into imagination. Still, your mind plays with the what-if game. Imagine digging up a fossilized USB drive in a Devonian shale bed. Imagine brushing dirt off a metallic figurine carved in the likeness of something that isn't human. Imagine a row of stone blocks buried too deep to belong to Homo sapiens, their surfaces etched with patterns not quite language, not quite decoration. You know full well there's no evidence for any of this, but in the gentle half-dream haze of midnight, it feels perfectly possible. The rules of science can wait until morning. There's another angle here, one that makes you chuckle quietly in your blanket. We humans are excellent at losing things. Whole libraries vanish. Technologies are invented, forgotten, then reinvented centuries later. Roman concrete, for example, was stronger and more durable than much of what we build today, yet its recipe was lost until very recently. If we misplace knowledge across mere centuries, how confident can we be about understanding millennia, or millions of years? Maybe those impossible artifacts are less about aliens or ancient high-tech, and more about a reminder of how little we actually retain. The fan in your room hums steadily, but in your mind it becomes the echo of machines long gone, turning somewhere under miles of rock. You picture archaeologists of the far future finding our skyscrapers compacted into sediment, our plastics smeared into thin layers, our satellites raining down as scrap. To them, our world might look like a scatter of out-of-place artifacts, mysterious, misinterpreted, occasionally dismissed as curiosities, which makes you wonder, could we be misreading the same kind of breadcrumbs left by someone before us? There's a quiet joke here. Maybe the first advanced species on Earth wasn't building spaceships at all, but just perfected the art of making coffee. Their great monuments weren't pyramids, but cafes. Their collapse, probably caused by running out of cream? That's the kind of playful nonsense that makes you smile in the dark even as your brain keeps tugging at the thread of possibility. At the end of the day, or night, really, the U-parts may not prove anything, but they do something more valuable. They remind you how slippery history is, how easy it is to misplace context, how quick we are to fill in gaps with wonder. The London hammer may not be from a lost age, but it carries with it the dream of one, and sometimes the dream itself is the artifact worth holding on to, so you let your eyes close a little longer, body sinking heavier into the mattress. The artifacts, real or imagined, blur into the same twilight space where fossils, myths and questions all reside. Whether they're genuine relics or just tricks of geology, they do their job, they keep you wondering. And wondering is a fine lullaby. You roll deeper into the current of thought, and suddenly the sea is all around you. Not the calm sea of a vacation postcard, but the restless ancient ocean that has swallowed more stories than you could ever read. If civilizations did exist before us, there's one place you'd expect to find their ruins, beneath the waves. Coastlines are not fixed, they advance and retreat like a tide written across millions of years. During the last ice age, sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than they are now. Vast landscapes, plains, forests and river valleys were exposed, peopled by animals and perhaps even by humans. And when the ice melted, the ocean surged back, drowning those lands in silence. If whole human settlements from just 12,000 years ago now lie hidden underwater, what else might lie much deeper, from times unimaginably older? Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor you. Scientists know that places like Doggerland, once a vast fertile plain connecting Britain to Europe, were flooded around 8,000 years ago. Archaeologists have dredged up bones, tools, and remnants of a lost landscape from fishing nets in the North Sea. It wasn't Atlantis, but to the Mesolithic people who lived there, it must have felt like their entire world vanishing beneath the rising tide. And if that can happen within the blink of human memory, you can't help but wonder what was erased in epochs far deeper, when coastlines danced wildly with every climatic swing. Now for a quirky tidbit that sticks to your imagination like sea salt on skin, off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni, divers in the 1980s stumbled across massive underwater structures. steps, terraces, and flat surfaces that look suspiciously like pyramids. Some say they are man-made ruins swallowed by the sea when ice sheets melted. Others insist they're just natural sandstone formations eroded into geometric shapes. The debate hasn't ended. To this day, Yonaguni sits at the edge of mystery, half geological oddity, half tantalizing hint of a drowned civilization. Historians still argue whether global flood myths, like those in Mesopotamia, India, and the Americas, refer to universal cultural symbols or actual memories of drowned coastlines. The scholarly debate grows sharper when ancient maps enter the mix. Some point to the Piri Reis map, a 16th century chart that supposedly depicts the coast of Antarctica before it was covered in ice. Mainstream scholars dismiss the claim as overinterpretation of vague coastlines, but the believers keep pointing. The tension itself feels like an undertow, pulling your thoughts into the abyss of what-ifs. You let yourself drift into the image of walking along a vanished shore. Maybe it's the Sunda Shelf, where today's Indonesia hides vast drowned plains. Or maybe it's the Black Sea Basin, once a fertile valley before catastrophic floods rushed in. You picture fields, villages, maybe even cities now sealed under layers of mud, coral, and silt. Fish swim where markets once bustled. Coral grows over collapsed temples. The silence down there is heavier than stone. And here's a playful thought to keep you awake longer than you'd like. What if mermaids were not myth at all, but distorted memories of people watching divers or survivors from drowned lands? Not fish-tailed beauties, but real human ancestors clinging to rafts, their stories drifting across cultures until they became legends of beings half in water, half on land. Myths as misremembered history. It's both funny and strangely plausible. The ocean is an expert archivist. It hides things not by preserving them perfectly, but by locking them away where humans rarely look. Entire shipwrecks vanish into sandbanks. Whole aircraft disappear beneath waves. If modern wrecks can slip into mystery within decades, then ruins from millennia, or millions of years, would be utterly invisible. The sea is less a library and more a shredder, endlessly feeding civilizations into its maw, and yet tantalizingly, sometimes it spits things back out. A bronze statue fished up from the Aegean, a Roman harbour uncovered by shifting sands, or a Mesolithic tool snagged by a trawler's net. Your room feels quieter now as you imagine explorers in submersibles, beams of light cutting through the blackness of the deep. They stumble on a perfectly squared arch, or a row of columns half buried in silt. For a moment the world tilts. Are these natural formations or proof that history is not what we thought? And then the current sweeps them along, the discovery lost again. You can't help but smile at the absurdity. Maybe advanced civilizations thrived on landmasses now sitting under thousands of meters of ocean. Maybe they never had the chance to leave the kind of ruins that would survive plate tectonics. Maybe their legacies are nothing but whispers trapped in coral and sand. And maybe, when we romanticize Atlantis, what we're really doing is admitting how fragile our own world feels. Because if the sea has already drowned worlds, it can drown ours too. You picture New York, London, Tokyo, all the shining hubs of the Anthropocene, slowly swallowed by future seas. In 12,000 years, the remains might look no different than Yonaguni, confusing the divers of whatever species follows us. They'll argue natural formation or ruins, and the debate will circle, as endless as the tide. You breathe out slowly, letting the image dissolve. The drowned lands stay where they are, secret, unreachable, yet somehow closer to you in the dark of your room. The ocean hums like the fan at your bedside, steady, inescapable, and ancient beyond measure. It doesn't matter whether Atlantis was real or not. What matters is that the sea has always been there, waiting to take back whatever we build, and maybe that knowledge is enough to rock you gently towards sleep. The ocean fades in your mind, but its lesson clings. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and sometimes the tide doesn't just swallow coastlines, it erases entire epochs. That realization drifts into a broader rhythm, one carved into Earth itself, the cycles of rise and collapse. You already know that nothing in nature stands still. Forests burn, regrow, and burn again. Stars ignite, blaze, and collapse into embers. Civilizations are no different. To think we might be the first and only is to forget that Earth has always been a stage for repetition. Consider the long arc of climate. The ice ages alone are like a metronome ticking through Earth's history. Advance, retreat, advance, retreat. The last glacial maximum ended only about 12,000 years ago, which in geologic terms is the blink of an eye. A mainstream historical fact here: archaeologists believe that dramatic climate shifts, like the Younger Dryas cooling event, may have helped destabilize early human cultures, pushing some toward collapse and forcing others into rapid adaptation. If climate swings can nearly topple fledgling farmers, what might they have done to hypothetical civilizations long before recorded history? And here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, a Russian scientist named Emanuel Velikovsky stirred controversy with wild claims that planetary chaos, Venus ejected from Jupiter, near collisions with Earth, triggered ancient catastrophes that reset civilization. His astronomy was mostly nonsense, but his broader idea that cycles of cosmic-scale disruption might reset human progress still resonates with fringe thinkers today. It's a reminder that our fear of collapse isn't new, it's woven deep into our imaginations. Historians still argue whether collapse is inevitable or just circumstantial. Joseph Tainter, for example, proposed that civilizations collapse when their complexity outpaces the benefits it brings. Others argue that external shocks, drought, invasion, disease, are the real culprits. The truth is slippery, like trying to hold water in your hands. What we do know is that cycles of rise and collapse have defined human history itself. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Maya, Rome. Each rose to dizzying heights, only to tumble back down. If it happened to them, why not to others before them, erased too thoroughly to even leave myths behind? Close your eyes and imagine Earth as a clock not of hours but of ages. Each tick is a rise, each tock a collapse. The clock has been running for billions of years, far longer than humans have even existed. Civilizations, ours, and maybe others, are like sparks flaring briefly before winking out. You get lost in the rhythm. Spark, darkness, Maybe that rhythm is the true constant, and we're only ever passing through one of its bright moments. Think about the natural resets this planet loves to deliver. Asteroids don't send RSVP cards. The impact 66 million years ago wiped out the dinosaurs in a geological instant, clearing space for mammals. Supervolcanoes like the Toba eruption about 74,000 years ago nearly choked humanity into extinction. There's even evidence of solar flares strong enough to strip ozone and disrupt climates. These aren't gentle nudges, they're reset buttons. You can't help but wonder if intelligence itself is part of the cycle, a spark that rises, thrives, and then is snuffed by forces indifferent to memory. And here comes the joke that softens the dread. If civilizations really do cycle endlessly, maybe Earth is just a cosmic version of your phone's to-do list. Build civilization? Check. Collapse civilization? Check. Forget what you did and start over? Check. The universe, it turns out, might be the ultimate procrastinator. Your body feels heavy as you consider how fragile even our modern systems are. A power grid outage, a financial crash, a pandemic. Tiny ripples compared to asteroids or supervolcanoes, yet enough to make you feel how thin the fabric of stability really is. Now scale that fragility into deep time. If others came before, maybe they faced the same cycles, building upward until nature tapped them on the shoulder and whispered, "Time's up." There's another humbling layer here. Collapse doesn't always mean total extinction. Rome collapsed, but people lived on. The Maya cities fell, but descendants remained. If a pre-human civilization collapsed tens of millions of years ago, perhaps they didn't vanish completely. They shrank, adapted, and their traces were slowly absorbed into the background noise of evolution. Their stories, their myths, their knowledge, all gone except maybe as faint echoes buried in the subconscious of myth, stone, or DNA. As the fan hums, you imagine Earth not as a cradle, but as a treadmill. Life climbs, stumbles, and is thrown back down, only to try again. Civilizations, whether human or imagined, are part of the same motion. The treadmill never stops, doesn't care who's running on it. You let yourself smile at the image of dinosaurs in business suits trying to file tax returns before the asteroid cuts the lights. Silly, yes, but no sillier than believing humans are exempt from the cycles written into Earth's bones. You exhale slowly. The cycles are bigger than you, bigger than any species, and maybe that's comforting. If rise and collapse are inevitable, then you can stop pretending permanence is possible. You can rest in the knowledge that impermanence is the rule, and your role is just to walk your spark across the stage before the next top comes. The rhythm of rise and collapse still hums in your head, but the thought starts to echo outward, away from Earth. If civilizations here might come and go unseen, what about out there, across the vast dark between stars? This is where your mind drifts into the paradox that keeps astronomers pacing their hallways at night, the Fermi paradox. Put simply, if the galaxy is old, vast, and teeming with stars that could host habitable worlds, then where is everybody? Where are the signals, the probes, the interstellar postcards? The silence of the skies is deafening. Tonight, you can't help but wonder if the same silence might also echo backward into Earth's past. If the cosmos hides its civilizations so well, maybe our own planet has been hiding some too. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Enrico Fermi, the physicist who lent his name to the paradox, first raised the question casually over lunch in 1950. He pointed out that with billions of stars older than the Sun, a technological civilization should have had ample time to colonize the galaxy. Even travelling at sublight speeds, the whole Milky Way could, in theory, be explored in a few million years. A blink compared to the galaxy's age of 13 billion years. Yet the evidence is nothing. No signals, no visitors, just a vast quiet skid. Now for a quirky tidbit to season the thought. In 1977, a radio telescope at Ohio State University picked up a sudden, strong signal from deep space, the so-called wow signal. It lasted only 72 seconds and never repeated. Scientists chalk it up to natural phenomena or maybe even a stray satellite transmission. But the mystery lingers, scrawled in red ink by the astronomer who found it, literally writing "wow" in the data margin. For decades, dreamers have clung to it as the closest we've ever come to proof that someone else is out there. One fleeting whisper in a sea of static. Historians and scientists and philosophers still argue whether the Fermi paradox is even a paradox at all. Some say life is rare, maybe so rare that we're alone. Others argue that civilizations inevitably collapse before spreading far. A darker camp suggests they hide on purpose, aware that broadcasting your existence might attract predators. And then there are those who think the silence is only apparent, that we're like ants on the sidewalk, oblivious to the traffic roaring past. The debates never resolve, they only multiply, echoing Fermi's lunch table musing across generations. Now turn that echo back toward Earth. If we expect civilizations in the galaxy to be rare, fragile, or hidden, then maybe that principle applies here too. Perhaps Earth has hosted intelligence more than once, but each time the cycle ended before it could leave durable, obvious signs. Maybe we're listening for radio signals in space while ignoring the possibility that our own rocks and sediments are already full of faint static, geological, wow, signals from civilizations erased by time. You smile at the absurdity of it. Imagine a paleontologist in the distant future digging up a thin layer of unusual carbon isotopes from the Paleocene era and circling it with a pen, writing wow in the margins. The signal would be there, but without context it would look like just another anomaly. The Earth's record is already filled with strange blips, sudden warming events, spikes of rare elements, layers of soot. Natural causes explain them, sure, but what if just one was artificial? The silence wouldn't be silence at all. It would be a signal we've misread. Here's a joke that sneaks into your thoughts. Maybe alien civilizations don't contact us because they already tried, back when dinosaurs were around. Picture a UFO landing, the aliens stepping out, only to be greeted by a T-Rex who immediately eats the communication device. They'd leave muttering, "This planet isn't ready." Millions of years later, here we are, still waiting for the call that was already missed. The Fermi paradox, in its way, is less about others and more about us. It reflects our own fear of impermanence, our own suspicion that intelligence is fragile. When you compare cosmic silence with the silences of Earth's past, the fossil gaps, the myths, the drowned lands, it starts to feel like the same song playing in different keys. The universe doesn't shout, it whispers, and whispers are easy to miss. You let your body sink further into the mattress, fan humming steady, while your imagination plays with the possibility that the stars and the rocks are telling the same story. that civilizations flare up, flicker and vanish, too brief to overlap, too fragile to endure. The silence isn't empty. It's crowded with ghosts. And maybe Earth, like the galaxy, is just one more echo chamber of civilizations gone quiet. The thought doesn't scare you. If anything, it soothes. Silence, after all, is perfect for sleep. The silence of the stars lingers like a lull. But your thoughts aren't done stretching outward. If civilizations may rise and fall on Earth, if they may vanish across the galaxy, then perhaps the real root of the story lies even deeper, at the beginning of life itself. That's where your mind drifts into the Panspermia Hypothesis, the idea that life did not originate on Earth at all, but instead arrived here as a cosmic hitchhiker. Imagine tiny microbes clinging to the icy crust of comets, tucked into the pores of meteorites, or drifting in the interstellar medium like invisible spores. The Earth, in this telling, is less a cradle of life and more a nursery into which seeds were planted. And if seeds can be planted once, they can be planted many times, suggesting that maybe our civilization isn't even Earth's first, but simply one bloom in a very old cosmic garden. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor this dreamy thought. In 1969, a meteorite fell near Murchison, Australia. When scientists studied it, they found over 70 different amino acids, more than the 20 used by life on Earth. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, the Lego bricks of biology. To find them in a rock from space suggested that life's ingredients are not unique to Earth. They rain down constantly, free samples scattered across the universe. That discovery didn't prove panspermia, but it cracked the door wide open. And here's your quirky tidbit. In 2001, researchers at Cardiff University claimed to have found microfossil-like structures in a meteorite collected from Antarctica. They looked suspiciously like tiny algae, as if extraterrestrial pond scum had hitchhiked across space. Critics quickly countered that the shapes were just mineral artifacts, not fossils. The debate fizzled, but the image of microscopic aliens caught in Antarctic ice stuck in the public imagination. Sometimes the suggestion alone is enough to keep you awake wondering who or what might have sent life this way. Historians, or rather scientists, had to still argue whether panspermia is a serious possibility or just a poetic distraction. Some argue that it simply shifts the problem. If life came from space, then where did that life originate? Others counter that the universe had billions of years and countless worlds for life to get started, so spreading it around would be inevitable. The debate hangs unresolved, a cosmic shrug written in the stars. As you let your eyelids droop, you picture the early Earth, 4 billion years ago. The planet was young, violent, pelted by asteroids, its oceans steaming, its skies heavy with volcanic haze. Into that chaos fell a rock, carrying with it hardy microbes shielded deep inside. The impact sent plumes of steam into the sky, but the microbes, stubborn as ever, found refuge in cracks, in hot springs, in deep-sea vents. They multiplied, adapted, and billions of years later, here you are, lying in bed, staring at your ceiling, wondering if you're the descendant of space bacteria. It's almost too funny not to laugh, and yet the thought is oddly humbling. If panspermia is true, then Earth is not special in its gift of life. We are not a unique miracle, but part of a larger cosmic process. Maybe life is seeded everywhere, and civilizations, like mushrooms after rain, sprout in different places and times. Some bloom briefly and vanish, others last longer. Earth is just one of many garden beds, tended not by gods but by physics, chemistry and chance. The fan in your room hums like a rocket engine as your imagination pushes further. What if panspermia isn't just random? What if older civilizations deliberately seeded life across the galaxy? Directed panspermia, as some scientists call it, suggests that maybe we are not only seeded but cultivated. Perhaps we are the product of some ancient gardener species, scattering spores across space as casually as you scatter dandelion fluff. It's a wild idea, and yet the sheer age of the universe makes it hard to dismiss outright. If intelligence can arise once, why not again and again, each time scattering seeds to new worlds? You smile at the joke hidden inside this thought. If panspermia is real, then technically you're not from Earth at all. You're an alien squatter who happened to evolve good posture and an unhealthy caffeine dependency. Suddenly, that Monday morning dread feels less about your inbox and more about the crushing existential weight of being a cosmic immigrant. Congratulations, your green card is written in DNA. The panspermia doorway isn't about certainty, it's about permission to imagine that life doesn't belong to one planet, one species, or one time. It reminds you that seeds fall everywhere, that survival is unlikely but not impossible, and that out of billions of failures, sometimes one sprouts into something magnificent. Maybe there were sprouts before us, here or elsewhere. Maybe there will be sprouts after. What matters is the continuity, the persistence, the stubborn refusal of life to stay silent. And so you let the idea settle like a blanket. You are not alone. Not because aliens are calling, but because every breath you take may be part of a chain that began not here, but out there, under another sun in another age. Whether we are the first or the 1000th civilization on Earth. The story began long before us, and will likely continue long after. That realization doesn't keep you awake, it rocks you, gently, towards sleep. The thought of panspermia still clings to you like cosmic dust, but now your mind narrows in closer, down to the very instructions written inside your body. DNA, 3 letters that carry your entire existence, curled into a double helix that looks almost too elegant to be accidental. If life truly arrived here from space, then your genetic code itself is a souvenir, a little alien artifact carried forward in every cell. And here's where the night pulls you towards shared DNA puzzles, the oddities and mysteries written in our genes that might whisper about ancient origins. Start with a mainstream historical fact. Every living thing on Earth uses the same genetic code. Whether it's a bacterium in a boiling vent, a fern in your neighbour's garden, or you lying in bed, the letters A, T, C, and G spell life in the same universal alphabet. That commonality suggests a single origin. It's like discovering that every book in a vast library is written in the same script. Evolution explains it by saying all life shares a common ancestor, but if panspermia played a role, it might mean life was seeded here already carrying that code, designed, intentionally or not, to be universal. Now for a quirky tidbit to keep you awake longer than you intended. In 2013, scientists in Kazakhstan published a paper claiming that DNA might actually contain a mathematical message embedded within it. They suggested that patterns in the genetic code showed signs of intelligent design, like a cosmic watermark left by whoever seeded life here. Mainstream biology dismissed the paper as speculative at best, pseudoscience at worst, but still, the idea of your body carrying a secret alien message is the sort of thing your brain likes to chew on when the rest of the world is asleep. Scientists, philosophers, and historians of science still argue over what DNA's quirks really mean. Some say the universality of the code is just proof that evolution works best when it doesn't reinvent the wheel. Others wonder if it's evidence of convergent evolution, the idea that certain solutions are so efficient they'll emerge repeatedly, even across different planets. And then there are the fringe thinkers who take it further, suggesting that DNA is not just a code for life, but also a code of communication, a biological USB drive carrying information from whoever came before. You picture yourself holding that double helix, like a rope twisting endlessly upward. Hidden within it are sequences of junk DNA, stretches that don't code for proteins, mysterious leftovers that still baffle scientists. What if they're not junk at all, but messages written in a language we haven't cracked? What if civilizations long gone use DNA itself as their time capsule, a way to outlast tectonic churn and cosmic resets? After all, rocks crumble, myths fade, artifacts rust, but DNA has been whispering its story for billions of years. Your mind drifts to the Human Genome Project, that vast effort in the early 2000s to map every gene in our bodies. When scientists finished, they realized we share surprising amounts of DNA with other creatures, 50% with bananas, 85% with mice, and more than 98% with chimpanzees. The joke writes itself: you're part banana, and only slightly more advanced than your cat. But it also raises a strange question. If all life shares the same code, could we all be branches of an original seed that didn't even start here? Imagine alien microbes falling onto Earth 4 billion years ago. Their DNA simple but submitted sturdy, built to adapt. Over eons, that day unfolded into trees, jellyfish, dinosaurs, and eventually you scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m. The shared genetic puzzles we see today might not just be evidence of earthly ancestry, but cosmic ancestry. The entire biosphere could be one family tree rooted in the stars. And here's a joke you can't resist. If DNA really carries a cosmic watermark, maybe it says something embarrassingly simple, like made in Andromeda, or property of Galactic Corporation number 42. You imagine scientists decoding junk DNA only to discover it's just interstellar copyright law. That's the sort of cosmic punchline that makes you chuckle quietly into the darkness. Still, the puzzles are serious. Viruses, for instance, insert their genetic material into ours, leaving fragments that become part of human DNA. Over millions of years, we've collected thousands of these viral hitchhikers, like graffiti tags scrawled across our genetic walls. Some scientists propose that even these viral invasions could be part of panspermia, that viruses themselves might travel between worlds, carrying DNA snippets that rewrite the scripts of entire species. If so, then evolution isn't just Earth's story, it's a galactic collaboration written across billions of years. Your body feels heavy, but your imagination is light, drifting through this possibility. Maybe civilizations don't survive by building monuments of stone or metal, but by planting information in biology itself. Maybe DNA is the only vessel sturdy enough to last through extinctions, climate swings, and even planetary catastrophes. If that's true, then you, your blood, your breath, your dreams, are already the artifact of something older. The fan hums steadily, like the sending of a giant molecular helix, and you realize how easily the boundaries blur. Civilization, life, ancestry, myth, they all coil together like strands of DNA. You might be the first civilization here, or the latest in a long chain. Either way, the code inside you carries the story, waiting for you to close your eyes and dream the rest. The spiraling double helix fades in your imagination, but the question it leaves behind keeps you awake. What if Earth wasn't the first place where our story began? If panspermia really works, then maybe our home isn't Earth at all, it's Mars. Tonight your thoughts drift across the void, red dust rising in ghostly storms as you imagine the Martian mirror. A world that could have been the cradle before Earth ever got the chance. Here is your mainstream historical fact to set the scene. Billions of years ago, Mars was not the frozen desert you see today. NASA's rovers have found clear signs that the red planet once had flowing rivers, vast lakes, and even a northern ocean that may have covered a third of the planet. Its atmosphere was thicker, its climate warmer, and for a window of time it looked startlingly Earth-like. Meanwhile, Earth itself was still young and chaotic, its surface hammered by asteroids, its oceans boiling from volcanic fury. If you were placing bets on which planet would host the first life, Mars would have been the smarter gamble. Now for a quirky tidbit that sends your mind spiralling. In '96, a meteorite found in Antarctica, known as ALH8 4001, was claimed to contain tiny fossil-like structures, possibly evidence of Martian microbes. President Bill Clinton even addressed the nation about it, hinting at the possibility of life beyond Earth. Later analyses suggested the features might be non-biological, just minerals forming shapes that trick the eye. Still, the image of alien microbes riding a rock across the solar system and landing on Earth has been burned into popular imagination. Scientists still argue whether life actually started on Mars and later migrated here, or if both planets shared life's building blocks thanks to meteorite exchange. Impacts on Mars can fling rocks into space, and some of those rocks eventually fall to Earth. Over 200 confirmed Martian meteorites sit in our collections today. It's entirely possible that microbes once hitched a ride, survived the journey, and seeded our oceans. If so, then Earth is not life's birthplace, just its adopted home. Your eyelids droop as you picture early Mars, with rivers winding through valleys, waves lapping against shorelines, and maybe, just maybe, primitive organisms stirring in the shallows. You imagine them clinging to rocks, multiplying, and then, after some catastrophic shift, perhaps Mars losing its magnetic field and atmosphere, being blasted into space, tucked inside fragments of shattered crust. Those fragments wander for millennia until one crashes into Earth's oceans, carrying the spark of life. It's less a science fiction novel, and more a cosmic immigration story. And here comes a joke whispered by your half-dreaming brain: if life did start on Mars, then technically all humans are Martians, which means every time someone says, "We're going to colonize Mars," it's less a bold new frontier and more a family reunion. Welcome home, kids. Sorry about the dust storms. The Martian mirror also complicates the idea of civilizations, and if life started there first, maybe it didn't just stop at microbes. Maybe Mars once hosted a flourishing biosphere, plants, animals, even an intelligent species, long before Earth had its act together. They could have thrived for millions of years until climate collapse ended it all. Their ruins, if any remain, now lie buried under sand dunes, obscured by dust storms, waiting for rovers to stumble across them. To us, Mars looks empty, but emptiness is the perfect camouflage. Historians and planetary scientists still argue whether Mars kennels, reported in the 19th century by astronomer Percival Lowell, were optical illusions or evidence of ancient engineering. Today we know they were illusions, but Lowell's obsession helped spark a cultural wave of Martian mythology, warriors, invaders, advanced civilizations watching us through telescopes. Funny how the human brain leaps so easily from ambiguous lines in a telescope to entire empires in the dust. You let yourself drift deeper into the thought. What if those empires weren't entirely imaginary? What if Mars did harbour something advanced, but long ago, so long ago that even fossils have crumbled? If Earth erases civilizations in millions of years, Mars, with its constant sandblasting and thin atmosphere, would erase them even faster. A Martian city could have stood for centuries and still leave no trace visible today. Our rovers crawl across just a few square miles, barely scratching the surface of a planet with more land area than all Earth's continents combined. The silence isn't proof of absence, it's just proof of how little we've looked. The fan in your room hums like a Martian windstorm, steady and endless. You imagine yourself standing on that rust-coloured plain, staring at a horizon that feels eerily familiar yet wholly alien. Perhaps you're not just gazing at another world, you're gazing at a reflection of your own beginnings. The Martian mirror shows you that life might not be bound to a single planet, that civilizations might leapfrog across worlds like stones skipping over water. The thought is both dizzying and strangely comforting. If Mars was once alive, if its spark reached us, then we are not alone, even if we're the only voices speaking now. Our very DNA would be a message carried across space, whispered from one planet to another, saying survive, adapt, continue. That whisper has reached you tonight, lulling you gently into the possibility that home is bigger than Earth and older than memory. The red dust of Mars still swirls in your imagination, but the thought shifts again, widening beyond one planet or even one solar system. If panspermia is true, if life's building blocks leap from world to world, then perhaps the chain doesn't stop at microbes tossed by meteorites. Maybe life, and civilization itself, could be passed along deliberately, like hand-me-down clothes from an older sibling. That's the idea of cosmic hand-me-downs, a notion both thrilling and unchilling, that we might not be the authors of our own story, but simply the inheritors of something left behind. Here's a mainstream historical fact to set the stage. In 1973, Nobel Prize-winning biologist Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverers of DNA's structure, published a paper suggesting directed panspermia. His argument wasn't that little green men designed humans, but that it was at least plausible an advanced civilization might seed the universe intentionally, scattering microorganisms across planets as a way of ensuring life continues beyond their own lifespan. Crick's speculation raised eyebrows, but it came from a respected scientist, reminding us that sometimes wild ideas have serious roots. Now for a quirky tidbit. In 2013, physicists actually proposed that the universe itself could be filled with biodust, tiny resilient organisms or spores hitching rides not just on meteorites but inside interstellar dust clouds. These little passengers might travel for billions of years, eventually falling into hospitable atmospheres like dandelion seeds drifting on the wind. One researcher even joked that if you opened your mouth during a meteor shower, you might swallow a few alien microbes. Probably not the best diet plan, but it paints the sky in a new, unsettling light. Scientists and historians of science still argue whether life is too rare for such cosmic gardening to work. Some claim the odds of survival in deep space are practically zero, radiation, vacuum, and time would destroy even the hardiest microbes. Others countered that certain extremophiles on Earth, like Deinococcus radiodurans, can survive radiation doses thousands of times stronger than humans can endure. Some spores remain viable after being frozen for tens of millions of years. So the debate hangs in that strange twilight between improbable and not impossible. You close your eyes and imagine the scenario. An ancient civilization facing decline gathers its brightest minds. They can't save their cities, maybe not even their species, but they can fling life into the future. They load microbes into engineered comets, launch them into the void, and trust that somewhere, someday they'll find a home. Those microbes drift for eons until one lands on Earth's young oceans. Billions of years later, you're lying in bed, wondering why you sometimes feel older than the world itself. The idea makes you chuckle. If true, then humanity is basically wearing a hand-me-down sweater from a civilization so ancient we'll never know their name. We've patched it, stretched it, and made it our own. But the fabric isn't new, no wonder it sometimes itches. The cosmic hand-me-down theory also raises unsettling possibilities. What if intelligence itself is not an accident but a goal? Maybe we were nudged toward consciousness by hidden code, not by chance. Or maybe civilizations don't leave monuments of stone or steel, they leave biology. DNA becomes their time capsule, carrying not just instructions for life, but also potential for mind. Our curiosity, our yearning for the stars, might itself be the inheritance of an older people, whispering through genes, keep going. Picture this, millions of years from now, Earth faces its own catastrophe. Humanity, or whatever species follows us, knows the end is near. Would we not also fling seeds into space? Perhaps spacecraft carrying microbes, plants, even embryos, set adrift like bottled messages in the cosmic ocean. That act would transform us into the gardeners of tomorrow, handing down life to worlds we'll never see. In that sense, cosmic hand-me-downs aren't just speculation. They're a mirror reflecting what we ourselves might choose. And here's a soft joke to lighten the heaviness. Imagine aliens arriving one day, disappointed. You were supposed to build utopia with the DNA sweater we gave you, but you turned it into TikTok. The cosmic parents would be sighing while we sheepishly shrug. We tried. The fan hums steadily, like the slow rotation of galaxies, and your body feels smaller with every passing thought. The universe stretches in all directions, unimaginably old, and here you are, just one link in a chain that might extend back billions of years across countless civilizations. Whether they were microbes or empires, whether they meant to or not, they handed you the thread. Your job is simply to carry it forward. The idea doesn't scare you, it comforts you. Because if we are inheritors, then we are not alone. We are part of something vast, ancient, and ongoing. Life itself is the gift passed down, generation by generation, planet by planet, civilization by civilization. And tonight, that realization is enough to let your eyelids fall a little heavier. You're just wearing the sweater. You don't have to know who knit it. The idea of cosmic hand-me-down settles softly, but it leaves behind a nagging question. If civilizations before us could scatter life across space, what if some of their legacy still lingers here, not erased, not drowned, not buried, but quietly coexisting with us? Your mind drifts toward the eerie notion of a shadow biosphere, forms of life on Earth that are not like us at all, operating with different chemistry hidden in plain sight. It's the sort of idea that feels like a science fiction plot twist until you realize scientists have genuinely discussed it in serious journals. Here's your mainstream historical fact. All known life on Earth shares the same biochemistry. DNA and RNA store information, proteins perform work, and cell membranes enclose the whole operation. The alphabet of life is remarkably consistent, whether you're looking at a bacterium or a blue whale, but that very consistency is suspicious. If life is truly robust and varied, why do we only see one version? Some researchers argue that maybe alternative forms exist too, with different chemical backbones, silicon instead of carbon, arsenic instead of phosphorus, but that we haven't recognized them because we aren't looking properly. And here's your quirky tidbit. In 2010, NASA researchers caused a stir by announcing they had discovered bacteria in California's Mono Lake that could supposedly use arsenic in place of phosphorus, one of life's key elements. For a brief moment, headlines screamed that alien life had been found on Earth. Later investigations cast doubt, suggesting the bacteria still relied on phosphorus after all. But the frenzy showed how eager we are to believe in a shadow biosphere, and how plausible it feels that life's diversity is greater than we've noticed. Scientists still argue whether such a biosphere could exist undetected. Some propose that microbes with unusual biochemistry might inhabit niches we rarely study, deep underground, inside extreme hot springs, or even within the ocean's unexplored trenches? If so, they might have been here all along, evolving separately from the standard tree of life. And if that's true, it raises a staggering possibility. Maybe Earth has hosted multiple origins of life, not just one. Our civilization may be just one of many experiments running side by side, some so alien we wouldn't even recognize them. You picture yourself standing on a beach, sand squishing between your toes. The grains glitter under the moonlight, ordinary and familiar. But what if some of those grains are not just minerals but organisms, alive, humming with the chemistry you can't detect? You breathe in, and the air fills your lungs. But what if other forms of life are swimming through it too? Invisible, untouchable, or untouchable, as indifferent to you as you are to them. The thought isn't frightening. It's strangely soothing, as if the world is far richer and more crowded than your senses allow. And here comes a joke whispered by your half-dreaming mind. Maybe your lost socks aren't lost at all. Maybe they've slipped into the shadow biosphere, happily living their best lives in dimensions your laundry machine can't perceive. It's ridiculous. But then again, so is the idea of microbes thriving in the boiling acid pools, yet we know those exist. The shadow biosphere theory is less about finding aliens and more about challenging assumptions. If all life we know is one branch, then maybe we've mistaken the branch for the whole tree. The real biosphere could be a forest, lush with diversity we haven't mapped. Some forms may share our ancestry, while others may come from entirely separate origins, parallel experiments that Earth allowed to coexist. Your mind drifts further. If shadow life exists, maybe it represents not just another biology, but another history. Perhaps earlier civilizations erased from the surface, left behind microbes engineered to last. Perhaps their genetic signatures still hum quietly under our feet, embedded in soil or water, hidden from our tests because we don't know what questions to ask. Their monuments may be gone, but their biology endures, a whisper across time. Historians of science often debate whether we'd even recognize such discoveries if we stumbled upon them. Our instruments are designed to detect the chemistry we already expect. If life falls outside those expectations, it's invisible to us, like radio waves before humans built radios. You imagine future scientists laughing at our narrow vision, the way we laugh at ancient maps that left half the world blank. The fan in your room hums steady, but your thoughts hum deeper. Maybe you are not alone in your own room. Maybe you are surrounded by life beyond life, invisible neighbours drifting through your walls, your air, your water, utterly unaware of you in return. It's not spooky, it's comforting, like realising you live in a bustling city instead of an empty desert. You exhale slowly, eyes heavier now. Whether the shadow biosphere is real or not, it reminds you that Earth may still hold secrets as profound as anything hidden in space. Civilizations might have come and gone, but their echoes may not be in fossils or myths. They might be breathing with you now, unseen, patient, and enduring. The thought of invisible neighbours drifts away, but it leaves you staring at your own reflection in time. If civilizations can rise, vanish, or even hide, then the question circles back to us. What signs will we leave behind? Imagine, millions of years from now, another species, or maybe even another version of humanity scratching at the crust, wondering if they are the first. What would they actually find of us? Would the echoes of your world be unmistakable, or would they fade into the same silence that hides any who might have come before? Start with a mainstream historical fact. When archaeologists dig into layers of Earth, they often find pottery shards, bones, and tools as the most enduring human traces. Stone outlasts wood, and ceramics outlast stone. The oldest pottery on record comes from China, dating back around 20,000 years, still intact enough to hold in your hand today. That's impressive longevity, but in geological terms, it's nothing. 20,000 years is a grain of sand in Earth's hourglass. If future diggers are looking tens of millions of years ahead, even our strongest ceramics might already be dust. Now for a quirky tidbit that feels more unsettling the longer you think about it. Every year, humanity produces around 400 million tons of plastic. It litters the oceans, clogs rivers, and piles up in landfills. Geologists already talk about a plastiglomerate, a new kind of rock made of melted plastic fused with sand and shell fragments. Imagine future paleontologists puzzling over this strange hybrid, scratching their heads at why nature suddenly invented a polymer it never made before. Plastic may become our civilization's fossil, our accidental time capsule, proof not of our greatness but of our trash. Scientists still argue whether our most obvious legacy will be ruins or residues. Skyscrapers and bridges won't last long, steel rusts, concrete crumbles, glass fractures. Within 10,000 years of abandonment, most cities would be reclaimed by the forest or sea. Within a million, tectonics and erosion would grind them flat. The real traces may instead be chemical, spikes of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels, unusual isotopes from nuclear activity, or the thick layer of chicken bones we've scattered worldwide. Yes, future archaeologists may nickname us the chicken civilization, which is not exactly flattering. You close your eyes and imagine standing millions of years ahead, looking back at Earth's layers. A thin band marks the Anthropocene, the human age. In it, there are plastic nodules, chicken bones, bits of aluminum and stainless steel, maybe faint isotopic signatures of nuclear explosions. That's it. No Eiffel Tower, no internet, no art museums, no TikTok, just residue. And if another civilization comes later, they may squint at that layer, argue about what it means, and then shrug. Just as we shrug at the soot layers of ancient extinctions, unable to say if they came from volcanoes or something more intentional. And here comes the midnight joke. Maybe the only thing to truly outlast us will be Lego bricks. Those indestructible little blocks will still be clicking together in 100 million years, confusing future beings who assume they were sacred ritual objects. Ah yes, they'll say, clearly the ancients worshipped a pantheon of tiny yellow gods. The question of what we leave behind is really a question of humility. We imagine ourselves permanent, but permanence is the illusion of short lifespans. The Earth is a tireless recycler. It eats mountains, oceans, and continents. Why wouldn't it eat us too? If other civilizations rose before us, their traces might look exactly like ours will. Thin chemical whispers, confusing fragments, anomalies easily explained away by natural causes. The sadness of the fossil record may simply be the natural fate of all civilizations, including ours. You let your mind wander into a darker possibility. What if we collapse soon? Climate change, nuclear war, or some unpredictable catastrophe, and leave only a few centuries worth of residue? Millions of years later, the evidence might be so faint that future archaeologists won't believe we existed at all. They'll argue, if there was once an advanced civilization, surely we'd find cities, machines, monuments. And the rocks will sit there quietly, hiding the truth in layers of silence. But there's a softer version of the thought too. Maybe what we leave behind isn't just plastic or carbon spikes. Maybe our real trace is cultural, mythic, or biological. Maybe future beings carry fragments of our DNA, our stories, our art, passed down not in ruins but in memory, even if the details warp beyond recognition. In that sense, we may be remembered in the same way we remember Atlantis, as whispers, echoes, possibilities too fragile to prove. The fan hums steady, and you feel the weight of impermanence like a blanket. It isn't tea, it's strangely peaceful. You're part of a cycle, not outside it. The signs we leave will fade, just as others' signs may have faded before. And that, in the end, is what makes the present precious. The knowledge that nothing lasts forever, and that even silence tells a story. The idea of fading monuments still lingers, but now your mind sharpens around a more peculiar question. What specific traces of our modern world might endure if someone were to look millions of years from now? That's where the Silurian hypothesis takes a harder edge, shifting from playful speculation about dinosaur engineers into a serious inquiry. What industrial fingerprints would an advanced civilization actually leave in the rocks? If others came before us, this is where we'd expect to find them, not in pyramids or statues, but in the chemistry of Earth itself. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Geologists divide Earth's history into epochs marked by distinct layers in the sediment. The Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, for example, is defined by a thin layer of iridium-rich clay left behind by the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. That line is unmistakable. You can dig into rock anywhere in the world and see the signature of catastrophe. In the same way, if industrial civilizations existed, their legacy wouldn't be architecture, it would be chemical anomalies spread globally locked into the crust. And here's your quirky tidbit. When scientists began looking for these anomalies in Earth's record, they found something odd called the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or PETM. Around 56 million years ago, carbon levels in the atmosphere spiked, global temperatures shot up by 5-8 degrees Celsius, and strange changes rippled through ecosystems. The cause is usually blamed on volcanic eruptions or methane releases from the seafloor, but some researchers, with a mischievous smile, ask, could it have been the exhaust fumes of an industrial civilization? Probably not, but the fact that the geological record can mimic human impact is precisely the point. If they existed, their fingerprints might look identical to natural events. Historians of science still argue whether future beings could identify our industrial layer. Some say yes. The combination of plastics, nuclear isotopes, heavy metals, and synthetic chemicals is unique enough to be unmistakable. Others caution that over millions of years, many of those signals will fade, leaving behind only subtle traces easily confused with natural cycles. The debate remains unresolved, a reminder of how fragile even industrial fingerprints are when weighed against deep time. You close your eyes and imagine Earth's crust as a book written in layers. Each page is a chapter in history pressed together over eons. Future geologists, millions of years from now, flip to the thin page of the Anthropocene. They see a sharp carbon spike, a sprinkling of radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests, a sudden bloom of plastics fossilized in sediment. They argue, was this a natural methane burst or evidence of something else? The truth sits right there in the rocks, but interpretation is always slippery. And here comes a joke that your half-dreaming mind can't resist. Imagine a future paleontologist finding a perfectly preserved Twinkie, shrugging, and concluding, clearly this was their main food source. No wonder they collapsed. Industrial fingerprints are humbling because they show how much of our presence reduces to chemistry. We think of ourselves as cultural beings, our art, our architecture, our inventions, but in the long view, we are just another layer of altered carbon and minerals. If civilizations before us reached a similar stage, their fingerprints might be buried deep below, perhaps in the PTM or in some other unexplained spike. Maybe they burned their version of fossil fuels, created their version of, say, plastics, fought their version of nuclear wars. The evidence, blurred by time, would look hauntingly familiar. And yet, there's a comforting symmetry to it. You imagine a cycle. Civilizations rise, they burn bright, they leave a chemical scar, and then they vanish. Millions of years later, another arises, scratches at the rocks, and wonders if they're the first. The industrial fingerprint becomes less a crime scene and more a signature in a guestbook. We were here, we mattered, at least for a while. Your body sinks deeper into the mattress as the fan hums steady. The thought is both unsettling and strangely soothing. If we are destined to vanish, at least some whisper of us may remain. Carbon isotopes, traces of plastic, perhaps even the faint shimmer of radioactivity in the rocks. And if someone finds it, they may wonder about us the same way we wonder about those who might have come before. The silence of deep time doesn't erase everything. It blurs, it disguises, it confuses. But it also leaves clues, thin, fragile, and waiting. Industrial fingerprints, whether ours or someone else's, are not monuments in stone. They are the faintest of echoes, but sometimes an echo is enough to prove a voice was there. The thought of industrial fingerprints fades, but it leads you into a darker place, the realization that not every page in Earth's history book is still there. Some have been scorched, ripped out, or glued shut by catastrophe. If civilizations did rise before us, then maybe their stories aren't just hard to find. Maybe they're gone because the planet itself acted as an eraser. This is where your mind drifts into the notion of the missing layer. Those moments in geological time when something so violent happened that it wiped the slate nearly clean. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Earth has endured at least 5 mass extinctions, the big 5 that punctuate the fossil record. The Permian-Triassic extinction, about 252 million years ago, was the deadliest. Scientists call it the Great Dying because more than 90% of species in the oceans and 70% of species on land disappeared. Coral reefs collapsed, forests vanished, ecosystems took millions of years to recover. If an advanced civilization had existed before then, their traces would likely have been annihilated, buried beneath lava flows, erased by shifting seas. The layer of devastation would act as a reset button, leaving nothing but a scar. Now for a quirky tidbit. In the late 19th century, some geologists joked about a supposed gap in the Cambrian record called the Great Unconformity. At many sites, rock layers from billions of years ago that sit directly beneath Cambrian rocks about 540 million years old with huge chunks of intervening time simply gone. Erosion, tectonics, and other forces stripped the record bare. For over a century, scientists puzzled over what happened. Some now argue it was caused by the global glaciers of Snowball Earth, grinding continents clean. But in the half-asleep corners of your brain, it's tempting to imagine those missing chapters hiding more than ice and stone. Scientists still argue whether mass extinctions act as erasers or as editors. Some say extinction clears the stage for new actors, like dinosaurs making way for mammals. Others emphasize how much information is lost, entire evolutionary experiments gone without a trace. The fossil record becomes a patchwork quilt with huge holes where civilizations, if they existed, could have slipped through unnoticed. You close your eyes and imagine standing on the smoking edge of the Permian extinction. Volcanoes roar in what is now Siberia, belching carbon dioxide. Acid rain falls, seas turn anoxic, skies dim with ash. Somewhere, just suppose an intelligent species watches their world unravel. Their cities crack, their archives burn, their monuments topple. Within a few centuries, all evidence of their existence is reduced to dust and ash. Fast forward 250 million years, and the only clue is a thin line of black rock. Easy to mistake for natural catastrophe, their civilization becomes just another missing layer. And here comes the half-joke that keeps you from falling too far into dread. Maybe that's why aliens don't visit. They already did, but they showed up right before one of these resets. Imagine an extraterrestrial delegation landing proudly in the late Permian, only to watch the Great Yang unfold. They'd sigh, pack up their gear, and check Earth off the list with the note, "Unstable, try again later." The missing layer isn't just about mass extinction, it's about time's ability to compress, to squeeze events into nothingness. When you look at a geological cross-section, millions of years can collapse into the thickness of your fingernail. Whole civilizations, ours included, could be flattened into a seam thinner than a sheet of paper. The more you think about it, the more you realize how arrogant it is to assume the absence of evidence equals the evidence of absence. The fan hums softly, but in your imagination it becomes the low rumble of shifting tectonic plates. You see Earth not as a stable home, but as a restless machine, always grinding, folding, and erasing. Civilizations, human or otherwise, are like chalk drawings on a sidewalk. Beautiful while they last, but the first hard rain, the first angry glacier, the first hungry volcano, and they're gone. What remains is a missing layer, a silence so deep it tricks us into thinking nothing was ever there. And yet the idea doesn't frighten you. It comforts you in a strange way. Because if the missing layers hide others, then we're not alone in our fragility. We're part of a chorus of civilizations erased and reborn, echoes scattered through time, each believing itself to be the first. The silence isn't empty, it's full of erased voices. And as your eyes grow heavier, you feel yourself joining that silence, drifting into it like sediment settling at the bottom of a sea. The thought of erased pages still hangs in your mind, but it soon folds into something even stranger, the way time itself plays tricks on perception. Human history feels long to you, 10,000 years of farming, 5,000 of writing, a couple centuries of electricity and engines, but compared to geological time, it's less than a blink, a hiccup swallowed by science. Tonight your thoughts drift into time's compression trick, that illusion where millions of years collapse into the thickness of a rock layer, and civilizations, no matter how grand, shrink into whispers too small to see. Here's a mainstream historical fact. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. By contrast, anatomically modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. If you compressed Earth's entire history into a single 24-hour day, life wouldn't appear until around 4 a.m., dinosaurs wouldn't show up until 10:56 p.m., and humans wouldn't arrive until a fraction of a second before midnight. Civilization, agriculture, cities, satellites would fit inside a single tick of the clock hand. It's humbling, even absurd, to realize how small your chapter is in the planetary book. Now for a quirky tidbit. In the early 20th century, geologist Charles Lyell liked to remind his students that even the tallest mountain could erode flat in about 20 million years. He joked that time is nature's hammer. That image lingers. Picture the Himalayas ground into dust while civilizations rise and fall below. The scale is so vast that even the grandest empire is little more than a mayfly flickering for an evening. Scientists still argue about how to help the public grasp such incomprehensible spans. Some use metaphors, tape measures, calendars, spiral diagrams. Others argue we simply aren't wired for it. Our brains evolved to notice seasons, lifetimes, maybe centuries. Anything beyond that is blur. This inability creates a blind spot. When you say millions of years, your brain hears a very long time and leaves it at that, unable to imagine how easily whole civilizations could be buried within. Close your eyes and picture yourself as a geologist digging into a cliff face. The layers are stacked like pages in a compressed novel. Each stripe of colour represents thousands, even to millions of years. You run your hand across one band only a few centimetres thick and realise it represents more time than all of human existence. Within that band, there could have been civilizations, many of them, flaring and fading before the layer was even complete. Yet to your eyes, it looks no different than the next. Time has flattened everything into anonymity. And here comes the joke that keeps you from sinking too deep into dread. If time compresses everything this way, maybe somewhere in the rocks there's a thin seam of coffee, representing our obsession with caffeine. Future geologists will scratch their heads and say, clearly this species survived exclusively on Starbucks. The compression trick also explains why certainty is dangerous. When scientists say there's no evidence of prior civilizations, they are correct, but the lack of evidence may not mean lack of existence. It may simply mean the evidence has been pressed into invisibility by time's relentless weight. It's like expecting to find a pressed flower after the book it was hidden in has been burned, pulped, and recycled 10 times. Your mind wanders further. If civilizations rise again after us, what will they see when they dig into the crust? Will they notice our carbon spike, our plastic residues, our faint nuclear isotopes, or will they see nothing at all, just a soothed, compressed layer, indistinguishable from the ones before it? They might argue endlessly about whether the humans ever existed, the same way we argue about Atlantis or the PETM. Time will compress our story, boy, the way it compresses all stories into songs. The fan hums steadily, but you hear it now as the tick of that 24-hour planetary clock. You're a fraction of a second listening for echoes that stretch across hours you'll never touch. Instead of frightening you, the thought makes you sleepy. Because if time compresses everything, then permanence is an illusion, and you are free to rest in the fleeting moment you've been given. Civilizations rise and vanish. Mountains rise and vanish, even stars rise and vanish. The trick is to savour the blink while it lasts. The illusion of compressed time drifts like a rock, but then your brain, stubborn as ever, takes another leap. If civilizations rise and vanish so easily, if evidence dissolves into silence, maybe the mystery isn't just physical, maybe it's built into reality itself. That's where your thoughts wander into the fringe, into the unsettling possibility that this whole pattern, life, extinction, memory, erasure, might not be natural at all. Maybe we're living inside a code. Maybe the reason civilizations repeat is because they're part of a simulation whisper, echoes of an experiment rerun over and over. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published a now famous paper arguing that if advanced civilizations eventually gain the ability to run highly realistic simulations, then one of three things must be true. Either civilizations never last long enough to reach that point, or they do reach it but choose not to run simulations, or, most dizzying of all, we are almost certainly living inside a simulation right now. His argument wasn't a late-night dorm room joke. It was a serious mathematical probability. Suddenly, the question of whether we're the first civilization felt a lot less secure, and here's your quirky tidbit. In 2017, two physicists suggested that high-energy cosmic rays might leave detectable glitches if the universe was simulated on a grid, like pixels in a video game. They weren't saying we'd find matrix code scrolling in the sky, but that subtle irregularities in cosmic radiation might betray an artificial structure. The idea hasn't gone anywhere conclusive, but it's enough to make you chuckle. Somewhere out there, scientists are literally checking for dead pixels in the universe. Philosophers and scientists still argue whether the simulation hypothesis is science or speculation. Critics say it's unfalsifiable. If you can't test it, it isn't science. Others argue that even if it's unprovable, it raises useful questions about perception, evidence, and meaning. And then there are the dreamers who say that déjà vu, glitches, or uncanny coincidences might be the seams in the code, tiny simulation whispers slipping through. You close your eyes and imagine civilizations rising and falling not because of asteroids or volcanoes, but because the program resets. Maybe dinosaurs were version 1, humans are version 2, and who knows what comes next. Each iteration leaves faint echoes, myths, anomalies, missing layers, like fragments of old save files bleeding into the current game. When you dream about lost worlds or déjà vu, maybe you're brushing against memory from a previous run. And here comes the joke your sleepy brain serves up. If this is a simulation, then clearly whoever programmed it needs a software update. Too many bugs, too many Mondays, and don't even get started on the pop-up ads disguised as spam calls. Still, the idea has teeth. If civilizations repeat because reality is coded, then maybe we're not the first, and we're not the last. We're just one of many test runs, one of countless scenarios playing out across simulated timelines. Maybe somewhere in another version, humanity already figured out the Panspermia puzzle, colonized Mars, and made it past the pitfalls we face now. Maybe somewhere else we never even invented before. Each reality whispers into the others, faint echoes mistaken for myths, instincts, or dreams. The fan in your room hums, steady and mechanical, and for a moment you wonder if it's not just moving air, but masking the deeper hum of the code itself. Maybe the whole universe has a fan, steady background noise hiding the server's whir. You smile at the absurdity, but you can't quite shake the comfort of it. If reality is a simulation, then impermanence is less tragic. Erased civilizations aren't lost, they're archived. Reset doesn't mean extinction, it means a new attempt. Historians of science sometimes point out that humans have always suspected reality was illusory. Plato had his cave, Buddhists have Maya. Descartes wondered if a demon tricked him. The simulation whisper is just a modern update to an old suspicion, that what you see is not the whole truth. And if civilizations rise and vanish mysteriously, perhaps that suspicion carries more weight than we admit. You feel your eyelids drooping heavier now, lulled by the hum of the fan and the thought of universes layered like programs. Maybe we are not the first civilization on Earth. Maybe we're not even the first version of this Earth. Maybe we're just tonight's dream running on someone else's computer, waiting to be saved, deleted, or rerun. It's absurd, yes, but absurdity is the perfect cradle for sleep. The whisper of simulation fades, but what it leaves behind is a quiet, grounding thought. No matter how the story is told, through fossils, myths, missing layers, or cosmic code, it always comes back to humility. If civilizations have risen before, if the universe itself may be seeded or simulated, then perhaps the most important lesson isn't whether we're the first. It's whether we can accept that we're not unique. Tonight, your mind drifts into the soft embrace of cultural humility, the realization that humanity might just be the latest draft in a very old manuscript. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor the reflection. Copernicus shattered human pride when he showed that Earth is not the center of the universe. Galileo pushed further, proving with his telescope that planets circle the sun, not us. Each step in science has been a step away from ego. Darwin placing humans firmly within the animal kingdom, modern astronomy reminding us the Milky Way is only one among trillions of galaxies. History shows a pattern. Every time we think we're special, reality gently corrects us. Now for a quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, Carl Sagan popularized the idea of a cosmic calendar, compressing the universe's 13.8 billion year history into a single year. On that scale, humans appear only in the last few seconds before midnight on December 31st. And in that same cosmic calendar, everything you think of as civilization, from pyramids to smartphones, fits into a fraction of a second so small you'd need a microscope to see it. It's the kind of reminder that makes you laugh nervously before sinking deeper into your pillow. Scientists, historians and philosophers still argue whether intelligence is rare and precious or common and disposable. Some argue that we are extraordinary, the pinnacle of evolution destined to explore the stars. Others say intelligence is just another evolutionary trick, like camouflage or wings, useful for a while but doomed to fade. The truth may be humbling. We're not the universe's crown jewel, just one of countless experiments. Our culture, our art, our politics, even our anxieties, all temporary sparks in a long, ongoing process that doesn't remember names. You close your eyes and imagine Earth's surface as a palimpsest, an ancient scroll scraped clean and rewritten countless times. Civilizations come and go, each believing itself the first, each writing proudly on the page. Then time scrapes it away, leaving only faint shadows of the words. We are writing now, but we're not the first, and we won't be the last. Our humility comes from admitting that truth and accepting our place in the sequence. And here comes a half-dream joke. Maybe the universe has an ego filter. Civilizations that believe they're the center of everything collapse quickly, while those that learn humility survive. If that's true, then maybe the real survival skill isn't technology or strength, but the ability to say, we are not the only ones. Humility doesn't erase wonder, it deepens it. When you accept that you may not be unique, you begin to see yourself as part of something vast. The myths of floods, the silences in stone, the isotopic fingerprints, the cosmic whispers, they stop being scary and start being beautiful. They suggest you are connected, not isolated. That your life, fleeting as it is, participates in a chain stretching back beyond memory and forward beyond imagination. Historians sometimes say humility is the mother of curiosity. Without it, we'd never look beyond ourselves. And maybe that's the real gift hidden in these questions about earlier civilizations. They aren't just speculation about lost worlds, they are mirrors, teaching us to be small in the best way, to marvel instead of boast, to wonder instead of declare. The fan in your room hums steadily, as if nodding along to the lesson. You breathe out, slower now, and let yourself feel the softness of being one among many. You don't need to be the first civilization. You don't need to be the last. You only need to live your brief spark, humbled and amazed, within the great cycle of stories that Earth and perhaps the cosmos endlessly rewrites. The thread of humility lingers, soft and steady, but your thoughts drift toward their final resting place. You've walked through fossils and myths, drowned cities and cosmic seeds, vanished fingerprints and whispered simulations, and now you arrive at the gentle thought that perhaps the real truth is not whether we are first or last, but that we are never truly alone. Tonight, you let yourself sink into the idea of sleeping in cosmic company, wrapped in the quiet possibility that intelligence is older, wider, and still unfolding across the universe. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ease you in. Astronomers estimate there are more than 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, and perhaps as many planets as stars. Many of those planets are rocky and Earth-sized, sitting in the habitable zone where liquid water could exist. Statistically, it would be astonishing if Earth were the only world to host life. Yet despite our telescopes and antennas, we've heard nothing but silence. That silence doesn't mean emptiness. It may simply mean we haven't yet learned how to listen. Now for a quirky tidbit that makes you smile. In Gibbs 77, NASA launched the Voyager probes, each carrying a golden record with sounds and images of Earth, music, greetings in 50 languages, whale songs, a baby's cry. The records are meant as cosmic postcards drifting for billions of years. If another civilization finds them, they'll meet us first through Beethoven, Chuck Berry, and greetings from strangers who lived long ago. It's both comically hopeful and beautifully humble, our species saying, "Hello, we were here," to anyone who might stumble across the message. Philosophers, scientists, and dreamers still argue whether we'll ever meet our cosmic neighbours. Some say civilizations are too spread out in time and space, their rises and falls never overlapping. Others suggest we may already be in company, only too blind to notice. Perhaps the shadow biosphere here on Earth is one such neighbour. Perhaps myths are echoes of another. Or perhaps the silence itself is company, a shared quiet between civilizations separated by gulfs of time, each whispering into the dark and hoping someone somewhere hears. You close your eyes and imagine falling asleep in a vast cathedral of stars. Around you, unseen, are other sparks, civilizations that rose, burned and faded, each adding a note to the cosmic song. Some may still exist, thriving beyond your sight. Others may already be gone, their ruins compressed into missing layers, their whispers carried only in myths, yet together they form a chorus, even if you can't hear it. You're not the first singer, and you won't be the last. You're just part of the harmony. And here comes the soft midnight joke. If civilizations are truly countless, then somewhere out there is probably one entirely devoted to cats. Imagine a world where temples, governments, and science all revolve around feeding, praising, and photographing their feline overlords. You chuckle, realizing it's not that different from Earth already. The fan hums steady, like the background vibration of the universe itself. You feel your body soften, your breath slow, as you let the thought sink in. Maybe the silence isn't silence. Maybe it's full of company, too vast and too quiet to notice all at once. Civilizations before us, civilizations after us, civilizations far away, all part of the same unfolding story, one without beginning or end. You drift towards sleep with that comforting weight. You're not alone, and you never were. You are one spark in a cosmos full of sparks, each flaring and fading, each carrying the same stubborn insistence to exist. Whether we are the first or the thousandth, whether we are a simulation or a seed, doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the company, unseen but real, whispering across the stars and through time, and with that whisper you finally let yourself rest. Now the story slows, soft as the edge of a dream. The questions have stretched as wide as galaxies and as deep as oceans, but the answers, like the stars themselves, can wait for another night. You don't need to carry them anymore. Let them settle like silt in water, drifting down until everything is clear and calm. Breathe in, feel the weight of your chest rise, the air cool in your nose. Breathe out. Notice how even your bones seem to loosen, as if time itself is releasing its grip. The fan hum, the room's quiet, the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat, all of it weaves together into a lullaby. You picture yourself lying not just in your bed but in a wider cradle, Earth itself, spinning gently through the dark. Around you are stars, their light soft as candle flames, and in those stars are countless worlds. Some may already be dreaming, some may be waking, some may be gone, but all of them keep you company, like distant neighbours you don't need to see to know they're there. Let your thoughts drift lighter now. You don't need to chase fossils, myths, or missing layers. You don't need to prove anything, not tonight. The questions will still be here tomorrow. For now, it's enough to rest in the mystery, to know you are part of something vast and unbroken. As your eyes finally close, imagine the universe whispering a simple lullaby. You're not alone. You never were. You never will be. Hold on to that softness as you slide into sleep.